And we have our special guest here, and so it is my distinct honor to introduce our final administration speaker, and then we'll go back to our readouts. I really want to apologize in advance to the Information Technology and Professional Service readout group, because you get to go right after the Vice President speaks. He needs no introduction. I'll tell you this. It's an honor to be with this guy. He is one of my favorite people, and he married up. I love his wife, too. Hey, everybody, how are you?
I will be necessarily brief. You've had a long day. I basically came to say thank you. You've had a chance to speak to Secretary Perez, who is one of the best guys I've ever worked with in my life. I mean that sincerely. This guy is, I like working with people who, like governors who held office before. He wasn't a governor, but because they know when someone asks a question or a request comes in, they deserve an answer. This guy never fails to respond to whether he's out pitching one of our initiatives and or coming up with them. That he's totally responsive, and he's made a phrase famous that I use, and I think every other member of the administration uses. He said, "We no longer train and pray. We got to train in place." And this is the single brightest, most practical guy that I work with, and it's an honor to be with him today. And you've also. When the team asked me to put together this job study, I didn't realize I had such an incredible secret weapon, and that was Secretary Pritzker. It's easy when you have Secretary Pritzker, and she's run a $1 billion operation. When she talks to CEOs who run $1 billion operations, they can't look at her and say, "You don't know." She gets right to the quick of it. She interviewed over 350 thereabouts CEOs of the Fortune 500 companies, and it's been a great, great benefit. And a great friend, Jeff Zients, who has been successful in his non-government career and extremely successful in his career in the government. He knows how business functions, and it makes it easier for a guy like me, who the only company I ever ran is when I opened a law firm and had a big debt over my head, and I hired 2 lawyers. So I had to make a budget, but that only lasted because I got elected when I was 29 years old, which on second thought, I'm not sure it's a good idea. I'm only kidding. Well, look, thanks for being here, taking part in the discussion about how we can use apprenticeships. Apprenticeships, when we develop them, are the single greatest asset of developing the single greatest asset we have, the American people. We have a pretty good farm team out there, man. Our workers are the most productive workers in the world. They are 3 times as productive as Chinese workers. That's not a criticism of China. It's not, we want China to succeed. I mean it sincerely. We want, when President Xi asked, "Why do I always say we want them to succeed?" I said, because we want to have somebody to sell to. But I mean that sincerely. I'm not joking. And we also have the most capable workers in the world. There isn't any skill that hardworking folks from 10, 20, and 30 years ago could do that they don't have enough cognitive capability to do now as industries change. They just need a shot. They need a shot. And they're ready to learn new skills required in the new economy. And you all are helping to take a big step toward that today. I know it's the start of the school year because we think in my household in terms of semesters. My wife is a college professor, a community college professor, and she's been teaching for, I'm not allowed to say the number of years, for a long time. And she also, during that period of time, was going to school every single semester, taking 1 to 2 credits to acquire 2 master's degrees and 1 doctorate degree. So everything in my house is about semesters. That's how it starts and ends. And the fact is that overwhelmingly, this new economy requires people with additional cognitive capability to make sure we remain the most dynamic economy in the world. And the good news is that jobs and companies are coming home. Your kids aren't going to be talking about outsourcing. They're not going to hear that, which the last 20 years, I've been around a long time. I don't know how many plant gates I've visited were padlocked, where literally the machine was taken up and unfolded, put in the back of the ship, sent somewhere else in the world. If you look at A.T. Kearney, which a lot of you use, they do a survey every year of the 300 largest industrialists in the world, and they ask where the best place in the world to invest. And they could be known for 19 years, don't hold the exact number of years. This past year, by a margin larger than any time they've done the survey, in all history of the survey, they say the United States of America, in every area, in the service industry, in manufacturing, in IT, across the board. And a lot of you use Boston Consulting Group. They do a survey, as you know, for every one of you who are invested in China, have operations in China. They ask the same question every single year. I don't know how many years, I think it's about a dozen years now, don't hold me to that either, but it's that close. And this year, they asked, and 54% of the companies said they plan on coming home. Now, they're coming home for a simple reason. They're coming home because we have the most agile venture capitalists in the world. They're coming home because we have the greatest research university. No one in the world can remotely compete with the research university, because we made a brilliant decision in 1954 in the administration of Dwight D. Eisenhower, when we decided that we're going to have to invest in research and development, and it was going to all be government. They said, no, let's do it. We'll do some in government, DARPA and ARPA, but we're going to invest in research universities. That's why we are so incredible. We also will have, as you know better than anyone, we will have the cheapest energy in the world in North America for the better part, if not the entire century, at least the next 50 years. It's no longer the Arabian Peninsula. It will no longer be Nigeria, no longer be Venezuela, etc. Just right now, energy is 3 times to 5 times as cheap here as it is in Europe, 5 to 7 as it is in Asia. That's a gigantic advantage. And guess what? We have another thing the rest of the world, some do, but we do better than anybody else. We have a court system where you can actually adjudicate disputes fairly, and we protect intellectual property. And we have the most productive workforce. That's why they're coming home. But there's 2 things we need. We need the best educated workforce in the world, the most highly skilled workforce in the world to keep them here. And we need a modern infrastructure. And we do not have a modern infrastructure, a 21st century infrastructure. Some of you probably got a big kick out of Biden, another quote, Biden gaffe, when Biden said that if I took you to the Beijing airport in the middle of the night, blindfolded you, took it off, and took you to LaGuardia in the middle of the night, and said, okay, tell me which one's in the developing country and which one's in the most advanced country. You'd think Beijing was American, you'd think LaGuardia was a third world country, an emerging country. Well, guess what? The press had great fun with it, except everybody but the governor, the mayor, and every New York official was reading it. And I had the pleasure of going up with Governor Cuomo announcing a multi-billion-dollar project to bring the greatest city in the world to have the greatest systems in the world. We're building post-Panamax ships. I took a group of Republican, Democratic governors, mayors, and senators down to Panama. It is like the 8th wonder of the world. Guess what? There's only one port from Houston all the way to Maine that can accommodate these ships. What are we thinking? You take a look at, they say, well, why did we grow so rapidly between the end of World War into the mid-70s? A lot of reasons. One of the reasons was we spent a little over 3.5% of our GDP on infrastructure. We spend less than 0.5% now on infrastructure. What's happened to our friends up in the Hill? It used to be a gigantic Republican initiative. So folks, what we're focusing on and you're focusing on is we've gone from crisis to recovery on the precipice of real resurgence. But we can't do it unless we fundamentally change the trajectory of the workforce and their capability. Now, what you all know better than I do, because that's why you're here, the single most effective way to do that is not just what we're talking about in 12 years. I think it should be 16 years of free education, but 12 years or 14 years in terms of our community college initiative. That's important. But the single most immediate way we can take people off the sidelines who have capacity and desire to work and improve themselves is apprenticeship programs. I think the number, I'm trying to find the number here, I think it's close to 85%, 87% of workers are employed after completing an apprenticeship a year later. Average starting salary for them is $50,000. Now you guys get it, you women get it. Why are they there? My wife, as I said, teaches at community college. Average age of her students is 29 to 30 years old. Many of them in the 30s and 40s. They're smart, hard-working people. They want to be able to go back and get a skill. They can't leave the job they have and raise their family. It's not just in your industries. For example, practical nurses. They can make $20,000 a year more as a registered nurse. So what a lot of hospitals are doing now, they have apprenticeship programs done by the community colleges, letting them continue to work and provide for the family. It takes 2 to 3 times as long to get that degree, but they are able to live in the meantime. That's why these work. I was recently out at an outfit called PG&E out in California, and they have a program that they refer to as the Power Pathways Initiative. They've figured out in the next 5 years, 15% of all the utility work in the United States of America are going to retire. 15%. And what they found out was, so they put together a program to train the next generation of inspectors, welders, electricians, pipe fitters, keep the vast system running. And they formed a partnership with nonprofits, community colleges, workforce investment boards, unions, etc. And they put together an annual training program that is an apprenticeship program. But one of the things they found out along the way that you found out, and we're looking for you to go trumpet it, is that there's an overwhelming advantage from training from within. They now made a commitment that they're going to hire from within, including management. And so what they find out is they train someone in an apprenticeship program while in the program, and then they continue that prospect after they're fully employed for 2, 3, 5, 7 years. You get an apprenticeship program to move from a welder to a manager. You get an apprenticeship program to move from manager to a director. And it saves them, it will save business hundreds of billions of dollars over time. What's the biggest cost you guys have? Replacement cost. Going out and training somebody to come back in. And what happens when you train from within? What happens when you go out there and you say, here's the deal. You join us now, here's an apprentice program, you do well, you can move within the company all the way up the line if you have the capability. What do you get? You get really devoted workers, man. You get people who will, figuratively speaking, die for the company. But it's amazing that you guys know it better than anybody knows. So what I'm looking for you to do is, I guess I sound like it, proselytize it. See the Lord here, you know what I mean? Go out and sell it, because really think about it. Think about the capacity and possibilities we have. Now we have roughly 400,000 apprenticeships in America. And we have states that have stepped up. Like South Carolina is a heck of a program. And they provide a $2,000 stipend to get it moving and so on. That's where we came up with a couple $2 billion to encourage states to do the same thing, to get in, to incentivize. The government doesn't create jobs, but we can incentivize people to create the kind of jobs and opportunities. And we're in the deal with it. We're in. Sign us up. That old joke, put me in, coach, I'm ready to play. For real. But think of what the possibilities are. Take a look at Germany and the apprenticeship programs they have. They have significantly smaller population, and my guess is they have 3, 4, 5 times the apprenticeship. It works. Anybody organized labor here, raise your hand. Because the reason why everybody still goes is you're the best trained people in the world. That's why they do it. And your apprenticeship programs, because you take incredible pride. Incredible pride. And there's no better way than learning on the job. Because I can tell you what, the only apprenticeship program I worked at, I went to law school because I wasn't capable of doing anything else. I graduated. Most lawyers are apprentices for a long time. And guess what? How well you do depends on who's training. What firm you get involved with and who takes an interest in you and actually train. Not a joke. You learn to write, you learn to speak, you learn to do everything. It's the same principle. And so what we're hoping is that this next initiative we have to take it to basically taking this raising this up to a level where there's a consciousness among the American people and so many employers that it says, this is a way to get it. For example, Jill, my wife, and the president, are you going out to Macomb College? They're going out to a place where we both been, Macomb College in Michigan, and because they've been a creator, they've been a real leader in creating these business partnerships with community colleges and students and knowing what skills you want and need, but in apprenticeship programs as well. I know the Secretary's heard me say this before. I had a great friend who was really a great basketball player, national. No one in here is old enough to remember the days when Providence College had great teams, and when Walker and Reardon were both later all pro, and he played in that team. And he wasn't the brightest academic kid on the table, but he was a smart guy. His name was Pete McLaughlin. He used to use an expression. He'd say, Joe, you got to know how to know. Let me say it again. You got to know how to know. I can take anyone in the Library of Congress, one of the great libraries in the history of the world, unless they can figure out the card catalog, work the computer, it doesn't matter. You got to know how to know. And there's no better way to know how to know than in an apprenticeship program. And again, the statistics are overwhelming. And so they're going out there, and more than 140 employers, colleges, and labor organizations, including many of you here today, are signing up right now for the apprenticeship leaders to be apprenticeship leaders, and pledging to create 20,000 new apprenticeships in the next 5 years. I quite frankly think that's a low bar. I mean, I know we don't want to set numbers that you don't meet and then you fail. We could do a hell of a lot better than 20,000 nationally in the United States of America. But I think what's going to happen here is that people see your success, and they're going to, including the states, and they're going to take advantage of the $2 billion apprenticeship fund that the boss is running here, and we're moving. 200 colleges across the country have already signed up for registered apprenticeship college consortium, where they're going to award double credits toward degrees when a student is in an apprenticeship program, because they get the practical difficulty that so many people are having. Now, let me end by saying this. Look, one of the things that the Secretary and I have found is that even when you offer and have access to significant help with tuition at community colleges or programs short of community college 2-year degree, a 15-week degree like we're doing up in Michigan, where you're teaching, literally they took 50 women from the hood, the neighborhood, all African-American women ranging in age, if I'm not mistaken, ask my staff to correct me. I think the youngest was 22 or 24 and the oldest 58. And there's an outfit that places IT workers across the country. What's the name of it, guys?
UST Global.
UST Global. And they put together a program with a number of IT companies, and they basically taught these women in the 16-week program a different language, the language of programming and computing. Because they found out they needed 1,000 computer programmers in the city of Michigan to get it off its knees onto its feet, because everybody kind of abandoned and took off. Okay? Every one of those women at the end of the day was hired. The lowest paying job was $57,000. The highest paying was $108,000. Not one had a degree beyond a high school degree, and most had GEDs. So that may be an exception. But you know as well as I do, the study we did showed we need 1.2 million IT programmers, IT workers between now and 2022. We need 650,000 registered nurses. We need, I think the number is 68,000 plumbers. We need, I mean, just to meet the needs that are sitting there right now. And so I realize if I sound like I'm evangelizing, I really am optimistic. I really, honest to goodness, am optimistic about the prospects for this country. I've been here a long time. We are better positioned by a long shot than any nation in the world to lead the 21st century economically, by a long shot. I remember making a speech, I believe it was at the Wharton School back in the 80s, or the 90s, when Japan was going to eat our lunch. Remember that in those days? Japan, corporate Japan was going to eat our lunch. I don't know how many times he's had to hear me, even when he was in Maryland, talk about how I want China to succeed, but China, as they say in my old town of Claymont, Delaware, an old steel town, not a patch on our genes. They're not a patch, they're a wonderful country. But they have problems that make any problem we have pale by comparison. And how many of you who probably turned to one of your colleagues and said the EU is going to own us in the 21st century? Raise your hand if you think that's still the case. We want them all to do well. It's in our interest for them to do well. But folks, we are so well positioned. And it's not rocket science what we have to do. It's not rocket science. It's to step in, fill the void. And we can afford this. We can afford this. In case you haven't noticed, we've reduced the deficit in the process here. And by the way, what's really going to make some of you angry, do you think it makes sense to have a stepped-up basis clause which costs $110 billion in taxpayer money not being collected over 10 years, $11 billion a year, which means that if I buy $50 million worth of stock and it goes to $100 million and I sell it, I pay a capital gains on the 50. But if before I die, I leave it to my child, and it goes to it goes from 50 to 110. I only pay on 10. I don't pay for that basis. 0.8%, 0.08% of the people in America benefit from that. Let me ask you a question. Just in terms of pure productivity and American interest, what makes more sense? Pay the full college tuition for 9 million students? That's what it'll pay. 9 million students free community college? Or get 0.08%, who already, God bless them, and they're entitled to inheritance, doing very, very well. What makes sense? There's $600 billion, even Romney agreed with me in debates. $600 billion in tax expenditures that no longer have a productive relevance. So guys, we can do this. We can do this. So when they say, well, Biden just said we're going to be spending $2 billion on apprenticeship programs. Come on, man. This isn't hard. This requires us to be one American kid. For everybody. The wealthy, the poor, the middle class, they all knew they had obligations. Everybody paid just basically a fair share. So we're looking to you. More than you ever wanted to hear today, I know. But I really mean it. We need you. The country needs you. The country needs you. We need you to step up and do what you understand better than I do, what you understand better than the secretary does, what you do every single day of your lives. You run serious companies with serious opportunities. And the good news is, it's always best when you can do well and do good at the same time. Thank you all very much.